You know what gets almost every gardener eventually? It's not the planting. It's not even the weeding. It's that moment when you walk out to the garden feeling good, and in less than 10 seconds your mood drops because something got there before you did. Maybe it's aphids lining up on your peppers. Maybe your cabbage leaves suddenly look like lace. Maybe your squash plants, the ones that looked perfect 2 days ago, now have damage all over them and you can't even tell where to begin. Most of us respond the same way because that's what we've been trained to do. We assume pest control means finding a product, spraying the plant, and hoping the problem stops. That was my approach for a long time. I used sprays, organic sprays, neem, insecticidal soap, powders, all of it. Sometimes it helped for a few days, sometimes a week, and sometimes it felt like I was just spending money to delay the next wave. The pests kept coming back, and every season it felt like I was fighting the same battle with slightly different bottles. What changed my thinking was paying attention to how Amish gardeners handle the exact same problems, especially in places like Lancaster County where families have been growing food for generations with a very different mindset. What stood out wasn't that they had some secret miracle ingredient. It was that many of them were doing far less reacting because they had built gardens that prevented a lot of pest pressure from turning into full-blown infestations. That's the real hack, if you want to call it that. It's not a single trick, it's a system. And once you understand the system, a lot of modern pest control starts to look backward. Today, I'm going to walk you through that system in a way you can actually use in a normal backyard garden. I'll show you what makes it work, where modern science lines up with what these growers figured out through observation, and I'll also share a very simple, old-school transplant trick near the end that can save a surprising number of seedlings every spring. The first thing to understand is that this approach starts way earlier than most people think. Pest control, in this style of gardening, does not begin when you see bugs on leaves. It begins when you build the soil. That sounds indirect until you've seen the difference yourself. Most of us think in a straight line. Bug appears, plant is getting eaten, spray the plant. But Amish-style pest control is based on a broader idea. Healthy, vigorous plants are naturally harder to overwhelm. They are not immune, and they will still get nibbled, but they tend to tolerate pressure better and recover faster. Weak, stressed plants are the opposite. They sit there like an easy target. Thin growth, poor vigor, soft tissue, inconsistent moisture, low biological activity in the soil. That's where problems compound. This is why so many traditional growers put so much emphasis on compost and soil building year after year. The goal is not just fertility in the basic NPK sense. The goal is living soil rich in organic matter and microbial activity, because that supports stronger root systems and more resilient plants. A lot of newer gardeners underestimate how much pest pressure is connected to plant stress. They treat pest control and soil health as separate categories, but in real gardens they overlap constantly. So the practical move here is simple and it's not expensive. Before planting, add compost to the beds every season. Not once every few years when things look bad, every year. A good layer of well-aged compost worked into the top few inches of soil is one of the foundations of this whole system. If it includes composted manure, great. That's long been common in traditional gardens because it adds both organic matter and nutrient value while helping build better soil structure. If you don't have that, regular compost still gets you most of the way there. The key is consistency, because the benefits compound. The first year helps. The second year you start seeing stronger growth. By the third or fourth year, many gardeners notice that their plants simply look tougher. Thicker stems, deeper color, faster recovery after minor feeding, better performance overall. That doesn't mean you'll never see pests, but it does mean a small pest event is less likely to become a season-ending disaster. Once the soil is handled, the next part is where this approach starts to look very different from a conventional garden layout. A lot of us were taught to plant in neat, separated blocks because it looks organized and makes harvesting convenient. Tomatoes in one row, peppers in another, cabbage in a patch, beans in a line. It's easy to map out and it looks tidy. The problem is that pests also like tidy, when tidy means a long, uninterrupted row of the exact plant they're looking for. To a pest, that can be like an all-you-can-eat buffet with a giant sign out front. Many insects find host plants by following chemical cues and scent signatures. They don't need your garden map, they need a signal, and monocrop rows make that signal easy to follow. Traditional mixed gardens make it harder. This is one of the reasons companion planting and interplanting show up so often in Amish and other old farming traditions. It's not only about this plant magically helps that plant. In many cases, the more important effect is that you create scent diversity and visual disruption. You break up the pattern. You make it harder for pests to lock onto one crop and spread quickly. So instead of isolating crops, you mix in herbs and flowers with strong scent, useful blooms, and different growth habits. Tomatoes with basil are the classic example, and people often focus only on flavor or tradition. But from a pest management standpoint, the bigger advantage is that you're disrupting the monocrop signal and increasing diversity. Brassicas like cabbage, broccoli, and kale can be mixed with dill or cilantro, and that gives you two benefits at once. Scent complexity now, and beneficial insect attraction later when those herbs flower. That second part matters a lot. One of the smartest things about this system is that the same plants can serve multiple roles. Dill, cilantro, fennel, alyssum, yarrow, marigolds, nasturtiums. These are not just pretty extras around the vegetable garden. They can help confuse pests, attract pollinators, and feed predatory insects that reduce outbreaks. In other words, they support the whole ecosystem instead of forcing you to do all the work manually. French marigolds are another common one, especially around bed edges. They're compact, easy to tuck into tight spots, and widely used in traditional gardens for both scent and root zone benefits. Nasturtiums are especially useful because they can help in two directions at once. They add color and diversity, and later they can act as trappa plants, which we'll get to in a minute. The bigger principle here is what matters most. Don't leave crops isolated if you can avoid it. A mixed garden is harder for pests to dominate and easier for beneficial insects to use. Now let's talk about the part that, in my opinion, is where this whole method becomes genuinely powerful. Beneficial insects. Most people approach pest control like a war against bugs, but a healthy garden is supposed to have insects in it. The goal is not to eliminate insect life. The goal is to create a balance where the insects you want can keep the ones you don't under control. Amish growers and many old school gardeners have understood this through observation for generations, and modern entomology backs it up. Ladybugs, lacewings, hoverflies, parasitic wasps, ground beetles, spiders, these are all working parts of a functioning pest control system. If they are present and established, they reduce pressure for you. If they're absent, every pest issue falls back on you to manage. This is why broad spraying, even with products that are considered organic, can sometimes backfire when used too early or too often. You may knock down the aphids or caterpillars, but you also disrupt the predators and parasitoids that would have helped stabilize the problem. Then the pests rebound faster than the beneficials, and you end up in a loop of repeated intervention. The Amish-style mindset is less about panic and more about timing. They don't assume every bug sighting requires an immediate full response. A few aphids are not automatically a crisis if predator populations are active or on their way. In fact, a small pest population can serve as food that helps build and hold your beneficial insect population in the garden. So how do you encourage those beneficials instead of just hoping they show up? You give them food and habitat. The easiest way is an insectary strip, a border or dedicated section planted with flowers and herbs that provide nectar and pollen through the season. It doesn't need to be huge. Even one bed edge or one garden side strip can make a real difference. Sweet alyssum is excellent because it stays low, blooms heavily, and lasts. Dill and fennel are fantastic once they flower because they attract a lot of beneficial insect activity. Yarrow is another strong support plant, and so are many flowering herbs depending on your climate. The exact plant mix can vary by region, but the principle stays the same. Keep something blooming so the beneficials have a reason to remain close to your vegetables. And just as important as flowers is shelter. A lot of modern backyard gardens are too clean for their own good. Bare soil everywhere, no mulch, no rough edges, no habitat, everything trimmed to the inch. It looks neat, but it can become a very poor environment for predators like ground beetles and spiders that need cover and overwintering space. That doesn't mean letting the whole garden go wild. It means leaving some intentional habitat. A little clover patch near the garden, a lightly wild strip along a fence, some straw mulch, stones along an edge, a less manicured area that supports insect life. These things are not signs of neglect. In a functional garden, they're infrastructure. If you build soil, mix crops, and support beneficials, you've already reduced a huge amount of pest pressure before you've even touched a spray bottle. But there's still one habit that ties all of this together, and it might be the most effective step in the entire system because it catches problems before they multiply. The morning walk. This sounds too simple to be a real strategy until you've done it consistently and seen what it prevents. Many Amish gardeners treat a slow early morning garden check the same way they treat any other routine task. It's just part of the day. Not dramatic, not complicated, just regular attention. The reason it works is that most serious pest damage starts small. One hornworm becomes several. A few squash bug eggs become a wave. A light aphid cluster becomes an infestation because it went unnoticed for a few days during warm weather. By the time visible damage is widespread, you're no longer preventing a problem, you're chasing it. The morning walk changes that. You inspect before heat and before the day gets busy. You flip leaves, especially on squash and cucumbers. You look under brassica leaves. You scan tomato stems and upper growth. You learn to look for signs, not just pests themselves. droppings under tomato foliage that reveal hornworms, egg clusters under leaves, fresh chew marks, wilting shoots, unusual discoloration, anything that tells you something started. When you catch pests early, hand removal is often enough. A small bucket with soapy water and 10 to 15 minutes of focused checking can prevent the kind of outbreak that later costs you hours. It's not glamorous, but it is brutally effective. And the hidden benefit is just as important. You become fluent in your garden. You stop guessing. You start noticing patterns. You know what normal looks like in June, in July, and in August, and that makes every future problem easier to spot. Now, if your garden is larger or your schedule doesn't allow daily checks everywhere, physical barriers fit naturally into this same prevention-first mindset. Floating row covers are a great example. They're not exciting, but they work because they stop egg-laying insects from reaching the crop in the first place. Young brassicas and young cucurbits can benefit a lot from early protection, especially during the window when pest pressure is high and the plants are still vulnerable. The important caveat, of course, is pollination. Once squash, cucumbers, melons, and similar crops begin flowering, you either need to remove the covers so pollinators can get in, or hand pollinate if you're keeping them covered in a controlled setup. That's where a lot of people forget the second step, and then wonder why they have flowers but no fruit. Speaking of strategy, this next part is one of the cleverest pieces of the Amish-style system because it stops trying to force pests out entirely and instead uses their behavior against them. This is trap cropping, and once you understand it, it makes a lot of sense. The idea is simple. You plant something the pest likes even more than your main crop, and you place it where it will intercept the pest first. You're essentially giving the pest a decoy target and protecting your higher value crops by location and preference. Nasturtiums are a classic example for aphids. Aphids often flock to them, sometimes heavily. If nasturtiums are planted around bed edges or near susceptible crops, they can draw pressure away from beans, peppers, and other vegetables. At that point, you have options. You can remove heavily infested trap plants if needed, or leave them and let beneficial insects feed there. Either way, you've redirected the problem and bought time. Radishes are often used as trap crops for flea beetles, especially near young brassicas or eggplant. Flea beetles may hit the radishes first, and while you might sacrifice those leaves, your more important crop gets a chance to establish with less damage. Some growers also use highly attractive squash varieties as decoys on the outer edges of the garden to pull cucumber beetles or vine borer pressure away from their main squash or pumpkin planting. What makes trap cropping so effective is that it doesn't rely on destroying the pest. It relies on understanding where the pest wants to go and making sure that place is not your best crop. It's placement and timing instead of chemical force. Now let's talk about sprays, because this is where people usually assume the real solution begins. In the Amish-style framework, homemade sprays exist, but they're not the foundation of the system. They're support tools. And that distinction is important because it keeps expectations realistic. A common traditional deterrent spray uses garlic, hot peppers, water, and a small amount of plain liquid soap. The garlic and pepper create a strong-smelling, unpleasant coating, and the soap helps the mixture stick to leaves and can affect soft-bodied insects to some extent. It's not a synthetic knockout product, and that's the point. You're not trying to sterilize the garden. You're trying to reduce pressure and push pests off a target plant when you need extra help. A simple version is to chop garlic and hot peppers, steep them in warm water overnight, strain the liquid, then add a little plain dish soap before spraying. Apply in early morning or evening, and avoid strong midday sun because soap-based sprays can stress leaves in intense heat. Reapply after rain. Will it solve every infestation by itself? No. And that's where a lot of gardeners get disappointed because they treat one spray as if it should do the job of an entire system. But used together with healthy soil, mixed planting, beneficial habitat, and regular inspection, these homemade deterrents can be surprisingly useful and cost almost nothing to make. At this point, it helps to say out loud what this method is not. It is not a promise that you will never see pests again. Anyone who sells that promise is selling fantasy. Even beautiful, healthy gardens get bugs. The difference is that in a functional system, pest pressure is more often limited, delayed, redirected, or naturally corrected before it wrecks the crop. That shift alone changes the whole experience of gardening. Instead of feeling like you're constantly under attack, you start feeling like you're managing a living system. And with that in mind, here are a few common habits this approach quietly fixes. It fixes the habit of panicking at the first bug. Not every pest sighting is a 5-alarm fire. Sometimes patience for a day, or 2 while watching closely, gives beneficial insects time to respond. It fixes the habit of planting monocultures because they look organized. Neat rows are easy on the eyes, but mixed plantings are often harder on pests. It fixes the habit of overcleaning every inch of the garden. A little habitat and cover can dramatically improve the presence of natural predators, and it fixes the habit of separating soil health from pest control. In real gardens, they are deeply connected. Now let me give you the old school transplant trick I promised, because this is one of those simple ideas that sounds too basic to matter until you try it and suddenly stop losing seedlings. Use cardboard collars around young transplants. Take an empty toilet paper roll, or cut a paper towel roll into smaller sections, slide it around the base of the transplant, and press it slightly into the soil so it sticks up a little above the soil line. That's it. This helps protect young plants from cutworms, which feed at the soil surface and can sever a transplant stem overnight. If you've ever come out in the morning and found a seedling neatly chopped off at the base, cutworms are often the culprit. The cardboard collar creates a physical barrier during the exact stage when the plant is most vulnerable. Then, by the time the cardboard starts breaking down, the stem is usually thicker and tougher. It's a perfect example of why this whole Amish-style system still works. It's simple, low cost, practical, and based on timing instead of force. You're not trying to solve every future problem. You're protecting the plant during the short window when it needs protection most. So if I had to summarize the 100-year-old Amish pest control hack in one sentence, it would be this. Stop treating pest control as a product problem and start treating it as a garden design problem. Build your soil every year so plants are stronger. Mix crops with herbs and flowers so pests have a harder time finding what they want. Plant for beneficial insects and give them habitat so they stick around. Walk the garden often and catch issues before they explode. Use trap crops to redirect pressure. Use simple deterrent sprays when needed, not as your only plan. Protect young transplants with basic barriers while they're still vulnerable. That is the system. And the reason it still works is because it's built on how real gardens behave. It doesn't depend on one miracle bottle or one perfect season. It depends on stacking small advantages that make pest outbreaks less likely, less severe, and easier to manage. If you try even 2 or 3 of these ideas this season, you'll probably notice the difference. And if you already use any old school methods like this in your own garden, I'd love to hear what's worked for you, especially the things that don't get talked about enough anymore. That's it for me today. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.